Hello and welcome to West Country Wanderings. Welcome to another one of my lost railway walks. The other day I was in the farthest part of West Cornwall, and today I've come to the other extremity of the West Country Wanderings region. I'm here in North Worcestershire, not that far from the Shropshire border, close to the town of Bewdley. You'll be familiar with Bewdley both on my Severn Way series and also from looking at the Severn Valley Railway. And it was a connection off the Severn Valley Railway that we'll be looking at today. I'm standing in the former track bed of the line that once went from Worcestershire, here, Bewdley, crossed over the River Severn, at a place called Knowles, and we'll have a look at that shortly, continued along here over a bridge over this lane, which no longer exists, right down there towards the lovely northwest Worcestershire town of Tenbury Wells. So we're going to have a look and see what we can see, the remains of that, and tell you a little bit about the history of this fascinating, very, very rural line here in the heart of Worcestershire. We're also in the Wyre Forest. Now, the Wyre Forest is one of the oldest forests in England. It's well over 1,000 years old. It's not as big as it once was, but it's actually now the biggest protected NNR in terms of English heritage and natural England, so they protect it. So it's good that it's protected now in terms of hunting, poaching, that kind of thing, because the whole area is covered with the most tremendous wildlife. And when I parked my car up here, I was the only person here when I arrived. Just the sounds, the sights were just incredible. Hopefully we'll be able to pick some of that up on my camera as we go on today. So you're most welcome here on West Country Wanderings for another Lost Railway Walks in the Wyre Forest. Now you can see here we're actually in quite a deep cutting. The River Severn is about a quarter of a mile in that direction, and I want to head over there because we might be able to see remains of the bridge that once carried this railway over the Severn, so it then linked south heading towards Bewdley and Droitwich Spa. Really was a very, very rural line. There was actually a station called Wyre Forest itself, and I'm hoping to have a look at that station later in today's video. I won't be able to walk to it because it is a fair distance deep in the heart of the forest, so I'll drive around there after we've done our walk here today. But this is just a beautiful, beautiful area. Just a couple of early dog walkers out here. It's only just about 8 o'clock in the morning here, and it's just a tremendous atmosphere, even though it's a very, very dull and rather damp day. Now, unfortunately at this location, the bridge that went over this minor road heading north out of Bewdley has been sliced, although we can see the abutments of it just over there, so the railway would have continued right on before it met the bridge which carried it right over the River Severn. So I need to join this road for a short little bit and then turn left. and see if we can pick up the line of our railway again. This behind me here is the Knowles Brook. It's in full spate at the moment. There is a magnificent bridge which carries the Knowles Brook underneath the road heading north out of Bewdley. For much of its length throughout the Wyre Forest, the Knowles Brook marks the dividing line between the counties of Worcestershire and Shropshire, and also the Knowles Brook provided the water power for many mills that were once in the Wyre Forest area, sadly now all closed. The other side of the road is also Knowles Manor, which I think was built in 1510, although it's undergoing a huge restoration and renovation project. It's not very picturesque, so I won't include that, but if I've got an old photograph of Knowles Manor, I'll see if I can include that now. Anyway, we're going to continue along following the Knowles Brook till it meets the River Severn, see what we can see at the remains of the bridge. Now on this most delightful footbridge which carries the Knowles Brook down through here underneath my feet and into the River Severn just there on the right. We have been here before because the Severn Way goes along on the opposite bank of the River Severn. So we have actually seen this viaduct before, but I just wanted to show it you more close up and put the whole thing in context to tell you about the former railway line here in this northern part of Worcestershire. It's a most beautiful spot. It doesn't seem that long ago to me since I was last here. When was it? Back in the autumn of last year, as I was making my way south along the Severn Way, heading into the beautiful town of Bewdley. But it's great to be back here again to be able to show you this magnificent structure, which is just right behind the camera. So what an incredible structure this is. I think you agree, even on a dull day in March. I'll tell you more about the history of the line later in the video, but the actual connection spans of this bridge were removed in 1966, a few years after the line closed. And so that way, over there, shortly, it joined up with the Severn Valley Railway, which of course you're now familiar with, had been a steam heritage line, but of course it wasn't once. It was a proper railway line that carried right up to Bridgnorth, although originally the line only headed in a southerly direction down to Droitwich Spa. And there was a later spur that was added on to allow them to run through trains from Tenbury Wells right through to Kidderminster and on to Birmingham. Closer up, you can really appreciate the construction quality of the supports to this amazing bridge. Have limestone here, of course, and the famous blue railway bricks. I'm not sure which brickworks they would have come from, but it's certainly standing strong. There's no evidence of damage to it whatsoever. If I had a deck put back on it again, I'm sure it would be able to carry trains once more back into the town of Bewdley. What an amazing structure. Well, I'm going to retrace my steps now back to my car, grab a cup of tea to warm up a little bit, and then we're going to continue our walk right into the heart of the Wyre Forest, following this former railway line to Tenbury Wells. So how did this line between Bewdley and Tenbury come about? Well, it all started with opening with another line, a major line, which still is a major line, between the city of Hereford, heading north towards the town of Shrewsbury, now known as the Welsh Marches Line, that later became part of the West Midlands Railway. West Midlands Railway later on joined GWR. There is a place called Wooferton where there is a large transmitter station there, and that location lies 5 miles from the town of Tenbury Wells. So the residents of Tenbury Wells wanted their own railway, and they proposed to build a branch from Wooferton to their town at Tenbury. I'm currently on part of the trail that's known as the Butterfly Trail. It's some 3.5 miles long, and it goes in a big loop. I'll insert a link to the Wyre Forest and many of the footpaths and walks and trails you can do in the area in the description of today's video. Today the Wyre Forest is some 3,000 hectares, so it's a huge area, although it was once much bigger, although nobody can quite agree on exactly how big. It is thought that it could have extended from the city of Worcester, quite a few miles south of where I currently am, extending right up to the important Severn-side town of Shrewsbury, which would have been truly huge if that was the case. But there's no clear evidence to suggest that was. But we do know it was bigger than now, and it's always been an important place for wildlife, although previously it was an important place for forestry and for all the mills that were in this area as well. But today it's just a beautiful, quiet place to enjoy walk. I've just come off the former track bed here, which has now got a hard surface, which is great, of course, for if you have a wheelchair or pushchair, makes it all terrain. And I'll imagine that this place gets quite busy in the summer and at weekends, but today being a weekday in early March, it's very quiet. You can see the line of the railway fence posts there. Wyre Forest is actually very similar to, well, its sister forest, the Forest of Dean, which is a few miles to the south of here, which also lies next to the River Severn, and both of them used to have coal mining taking place in the area as well. This feels very similar to the Forest of Dean. As we're going into the heart of Wyre Forest here, you just get this awe-inspiring sensation of the trees closing in around you, and it feels like you're stepping back in time. It's really actually hard to imagine that was once a railway that once ran through the heart of this forest, although that must have been a truly spectacular journey, looking at all the woods that you were flying through as you made your way to the riverside town of Bewdley. There's actually 2 separate railways here we're looking at. This one was from Wooferton on the Hereford to Shrewsbury line to the town of Tenbury Wells, and another railway from Tenbury Wells to Bewdley. Of course, this is the section here, the Tenbury to Bewdley Railway. Construction on the first railway from Wooferton to Tenbury started the late 1950s, and that line actually opened in 1861. The Act of Parliament to extend it from Tenbury to Bewdley was passed in 1860. There was initially difficulties in trying to raise capital. They borrowed some money from the West Midlands Railway with an agreement to pay back some of the later profits of the line. There was a landslip as well. I can't remember the location of that, see if I can find it on the map and insert it now, which happened around 1862 and 1863. And the line itself eventually opened in 1864. Traffic on the line was always very light. I think for much of its life there was only about 4 trains a day from Wooferton through Tenbury and on to Bewdley. There was a later connection, a loop, which enabled trains then to carry on through from Bewdley curving around to Kidderminster to join the main line between Worcester, Kidderminster and Birmingham, which helped to increase the line's profit. But in terms of freight, well, it served just a few quarries locally and a couple of the mills. There was a little bit of logging, but it really wasn't a big freight line at all. A few years after the line opened in 1870, the ownership of the line was transferred to, yes, you guessed it, the good old GWRs, amalgamated into their huge network which extended right up to this part of the lowercase West Midlands. There were a few intermediate stations on the line. The first intermediate station after leaving Wooferton Junction was Easton Court, and then the line headed right into Tenbury Wells, or rather it didn't. The station at Tenbury Wells, which I've mentioned before, is actually in Shrewsbury, in a place called Burford, just the other side of the river there, the River Team. And those are usual situations where the serving station is in a different county to the place that it serves. After leaving Tenbury Wells, there was another station on a place called Newnham Bridge, which should ring some bells, familiarity bells with you if you follow any of my canal series, because I did parts 1 and 2 of looking for a lost canal in that area, the Leominster Canal, because there is a tunnel there at Newnham. The station at Newnham Bridge still survives. For many years it was very, very redundant and neglected, but just a few years ago it was completely renovated and converted into housing. Now down that very steep gradient down there takes you back to the Knowles Brook again. I don't intend climbing right down there because the ground is still quite slippery after all the heavy rain that we've had, but it was right deep in there where there were sites of the many mills in this area. Well, I've just come across this truly magnificent carved seat which has got an engraving on it. It says Forester de Wyre. It's got some squirrels on it as well to represent the nature in this area, and also a carving of a steam train. How fantastic and cool is that? Even with somebody has cut some of nature's flowers here from this heart of the Wyre Forest. That's really beautiful, made my day. Again, I've just turned off the main track bed here, just for a short distance. We have that huge drop down there with almost like a U-shaped bend, not that similar to like a miniature Simmons Yat, if you're familiar with that location in nearby Forest of Dean. And it was down there, it was once the site on the other side of the Knowles Brook was Knowles Mill. So this is a wonderful nature reserve here, managed by the Worcestershire Wildlife Trust, as I say, although just the other side of the Knowles Brook takes you into Shropshire. I just sort of come here, enjoy the peace and quiet tranquility here, and I'll tell you some more about another little railway that interconnected to the main one that we're walking along today. Now, we said at the station at Cledbury Mortimer to serve that beautiful Shropshire market town, which obviously is just outside the West Country Wanderings area, was sited some distance, in fact in Worcestershire, away from the town itself. So that really didn't help the residents of Cledbury Mortimer. So for some time they've been campaigning to have a little branch railway off this one here of their own. In fact, a light railway order was granted in 1901 to connect a branch near Cledbury Mortimer station to go right much closer to Cledbury Mortimer, and also to serve the nearby village of Ditton Priors. And it was Ditton Priors later on that was to become the salvation of this little branch line. Now, during preparations for the Second World War, the Royal Navy needed somewhere to store their ordnance, and they discovered that there was a suitable location at Ditton Priors. And so the Royal Navy Ordnance Depot at Ditton Priors opened. Of course, with that now light railway connection in effect becoming a military railway off this one at Cledbury Mortimer Station. So the line's fortunes was boosted by that. Although after the war ended, the Ordnance Depot carried on into the 1950s, but it closed after that, which also meant that fortunes of this little light railway also dwindled. Cleberry's little light railway trundled on, but it finally succumbed to closure in 1960, although there was a revival of the Ordnance Depot, and that continued on to serve the Royal Navy after the railway closed until 1965. Now this gate, which is the entrance to this Worcestershire nature reserve here in the Wyre Forest, is also rather interesting because you can certainly make out some railway artefacts of the former Tenbury to Bewdley line. Let's have a closer look. Now you can make out the former track bed, the other side of the gate there, which was the main route. So that direction there is Tenbury Wells, that direction is back to Bewdley. And this gate post here would in effect been a level crossing, a minor level crossing for, well, people that were doing forestry here in the heart of the Wyre Forest. And this concrete post here is definitely railway, and you have these railway hinges as well. They're certainly older than, well, predate, sort of say, when the line closed. We'll talk about more when the line closed in a bit, but really good to see this gate here. Now, with increasing road competition in this part of northern Worcestershire, as indeed we've come across many times across the whole of the West Country Wanderings region, when we were looking at lost railways, the railway was under considerable competition and usage of the line was in great decline. The line was proposed for closure in 1960. However, there were a group of people that used the line regularly, and that was the school children in both Bewdley and Tenbury Wells, and to go between the two. So there was some opposition to closing this line completely. Now, sadly, the line did close, and closed in stages. The first stage was the original bit where the line originally started, coming out of Wooferton off to the Hereford-Shrewsbury line into Tenbury Wells. That closed in 1961, and when it did, an experimental service started for the school children coming out of Kidderminster and serving both Bewdley and Tenbury. But whether by accident design, that experimental service decided to start in the middle of the school holidays, so consequently hardly anyone was using it. It wasn't a great success. In fact, the entire line closed sadly in 1962, although freight continued on a little bit longer for a stub until 1964. What we have left though today is wonderful in terms of a space through the heart of this most beautiful and ancient forests here in North Worcestershire. It's an absolute delight to walk through it. I've only done about a 2 or 3 mile section of it today. I'll include a map for the section that I did today in the description of today's video. But as I say, there's lots of other trails you can do in and around the Wyre Forest, and I highly recommend if you're ever in this area, if you live locally, I'm sure you already know the delights of the Wyre Forest, and it's not that difficult to get to. It took me about an hour from where I live in Gloucestershire to get here today up the M5 and 449. It's a relatively easy place to get to, although once you're in the Wyre Forest, it feels like you're absolutely in the middle of nowhere. It's a tremendous feeling. It's a wonderful legacy of the line. I hope you've enjoyed this Lost Railway Walks today here on West Country Wanderings. I'll close the video and see if I can have a look at the former station that was at Wyre Forest itself. I certainly enclosed some photographs of it and see what it looks like here today. Hope you enjoyed it today. Take care of yourselves. All the best. Bye-bye.